Start the meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Kluwer? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Redmond is absent. Councilmember Collings?
Here.
Councilmember Stearns? Mayor Stackfleth?
Here. All right, so we don't have any special presentations, so we'll go straight to public comment. We'll start with those folks inside the hall tonight. Would any of the three that have joined us like to speak? Now it's four. Hi, John. You want to come up to the podium and speak? No? Pam? No? Okay. Going once, going twice. Oh. So public comment session is still going. Would anyone like to come up to speak? I guess not. We're going to close public comment and move on to council and staff comments. I'll start with the city manager. Todd is reporting in remotely today. And is he ready to make a report? Okay, go ahead, Todd.
Okay, so oh boy, busy since we last met. We've got a contract back from the city attorney to allow the Friends of the Library to take on running the library officially as basically a contractor relationship until they hire a library manager or a business manager. And so I need to sit down with them to make sure the language is working from their perspective, but we've got that just about wrapped up. John Kenny is finalizing the paperwork for the 218 process for the drainage fee. We've discussed here in the past that that would go to a vote in November. It turns out, after talking to our consultant and talking to the city attorney, it can go as a mail-in vote. We're just trying to get the specifics from both Raftelis and from the city attorney. So in terms of the negotiations with the owner of the former Crystal Geyser site, or One Shasta, we're hung up on, so he is willing to donate the land and easements for the well site. He believes that the water, he doesn't want to donate the water to the city to serve both sites directly. He's willing to serve the city, but he believes that he has water rights that he doesn't want to give up, and well rights are different than water rights. So I have retained a water rights attorney out of Sacramento for a few hours, and the owner and I will get on and get our questions answered, and hopefully we'll be able to hammer out some misconceptions about what he can and what he can't do with the water, and how do we move forward from this impasse. Obviously a lot of people are talking about the fire at the old hospital. It's under investigation as a possible arson. The property itself, so it's interesting, it is in receivership, but we have receivership orders from the judge, but the judge didn't fill in the paperwork on who the receiver is. So it's in this weird limbo state. But we go to see Judge Dixon this Thursday to work through, to resolve the issues here, and to see about finding the owner in contempt for not paying the fines that was levied by the judge, and potentially seeking jail time, and also to seek recompense for the city cleaning up the site after the fire, because the owner failed to secure it. So look for more updates on that as I can. Then, of course, there was the officer-involved shooting, which none of us can go into detail until the investigation is complete. The DOJ is involved, and more information will come out once the investigation is complete. Let's see if there's anything else on the list. So I'll get into the EIFD and the county as an agenda item, but there was a productive meeting with the developer about the landing with K2 Development out of Reading. They're a very sophisticated development firm that's doing work various places in Northern California and is interested in the landing site. And of course, Bob Kendrick, we're still in discussions with him. So those are the main highlights. There's a lot more stuff going on, but if anybody's got any specific questions, I can answer them.
Questions? Okay, Todd, do you want to just close at this point? We'll move on. We don't have any questions for you.
Okay, I'd like to move to Muriel to get an update on finance.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What I'm working on right now is I have actually reconciled December. I'm now working on mid-year budget, going through, I've entered all of the data into spreadsheets. I'm now going through and researching variances to see if there's any misclassifications or any of those sorts of things throughout the financial record to get those cleaned up and ready for mid-year budget, hopefully at the next council meeting.
Questions? No? All right. Thank you, Muriel. Appreciate it. Chief, would like to comment at this time on anything?
I don't have anything to comment right now.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. And City Planner, Jeff, I assume that you'll have plenty to say at your agenda.
You bet.
Okay,
When the
thank
time
you.
comes.
All right, council members, any comments at this point? Okay.
I just wanted to thank our fire department for their quick action a couple days ago. That seemed like a very scary and unfortunate thing that happened. So always glad to see our resources are effective, and I'm always in awe of their efforts. So thank you.
And to a certain degree, similarly with the train situation, really can't comment on that, but it seems that our officer did the best he could, all things considered. That's all I can really say at this point. And I'm sure things will turn out well for him. And he's made a good recovery at this point, correct?
Made a good recovery, and he'll be coming back on duty, I believe, this weekend.
Okay, thank you. The only other thing I want to talk about before we move on to committee updates would be that we have a LOLA meeting Wednesday, and there's a selection committee process that starts at 5. I already talked to the other council members. Tim, are there any particular committees you are interested in?
Which committees are available?
I'm not sure at this point, but is there any, if there were, LAFCO, you seem
Well,
to.
I've served on LAFCO in the past, so I have some experience there. Can you use your microphone? So
If it's available, would you like to be?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. And any other off the top of your head besides that one? No? Because I've heard that they need people in
Yeah, the
almost all of
commissions
them.
that I sat on previously were LAFCO and LTC.
LTC. Okay. Okay, thanks, Tim. And we'll move on to committee updates if we have any from city manager.
No committee updates.
All right, thank you, Todd. Okay, moving on to consent agenda, item number 7. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, December 11th, 2023 regular meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable December 7th, December 11th, December 13th, excuse me, and December 19th, 2023. Total gross payroll and taxes for periods ending November 26th, December 10th, and December 24th, 2023. C, second reading and adoption of ordinance CCO-24-01, amending municipal code section 10.44.070D. Consent agenda item number D, Siskiyou County Local Transportation Commission Local Transportation Fund Transportation Claim, resolution number CCR-24-01. And lastly, E, Police Department Report, December 2023.
I will move to approve consent agenda by title only, items A through E.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Vote is 4-0 on the consent agenda. And now we move on to item number 8, discussion of possible action regarding the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District update. And City Manager Todd Huaz will just open the conversation.
Okay, so as you all know, we had 5 hearings before the Board of Supervisors. During the second hearing, we had Board of Supervisors recommending a 4-to-1 vote for it. And, we went back. There were some additional items that they wanted added. We added and went back and was told that some of the items they asked us to add, we did not, which actually wasn't the case. Then right before Christmas, the day before the Board of Supervisors meeting, we got a notice from the county that the Cosmont consultant for the EIFD and myself were to appear the next day at the Board of Supervisors because the Board of Supervisors wanted to hear the agenda before the holidays, which is quite unusual. So we figured, okay, something might be up. So we get before them, we're the last item on the agenda and didn't really have any time to comment. The item was called and it was a 4-to-1 vote turnaround completely against participating in the EIFD with no explanation, but it was clear that that decision was made well in advance of that meeting, which is fine. That's their choice. Now, what that means is we need to figure out whether we're going to go it alone. With the backing of the county, we have more general fund resources that can backstop the EIFD. Now we don't have that. So what we net with the city-only EIFD isn't really that substantial. So we need to determine whether, we've already formed it. We've already formed the Public Financing Board. The next step is to say, do we want to continue with this? My suggestion is that we do, even though what we net over the life of the district isn't a large sum of money. But what it does do is it signals to grant writers, when you have an EIFD in place, it shows a commitment from the city that you are pro-development. So that's one reason to have it. 2 is it signals to developers, again, that, that you are committed to development over time. 3 is over the life of the district, as we do increase increment, even if it's at a slow pace, we'll have enough that we can do things like storefront improvements, tenant improvements, or the ability to do, use startup money for businesses. I guess, the decision before us is whether the city wants to go forward with an EIFD on their own. So a couple points with the county not on board, there are a couple benefits. One, we're stripping away all the county properties. So we can focus only on city properties that are part of the EIFD. Two, the public financing board with the county attached means that we would have a split say from the county and from the city, and that could lead to a lot of disputes. Now, if we go to loan, it's the city of Mount Shasta's decision on where that money gets spent only. Number three, if we do move forward and we get development happening on the landing and some of these other parcels, we we reap all the benefits. We're not in a tax sharing agreement with the county. It's ours. And so the county doesn't benefit at all. So the question for council tonight is, do we want to move forward with that city-only EIFD, which I think we should, and signal to the rest of the larger development community that we're open for business and make it easier for us to chase grants.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Clarifying questions? Yeah, all right, we'll start with Jeff.
City manager, are there any other financial vehicles other than the enhanced infrastructure finance district that we might consider in this?
Yeah, so great point. And I should have brought it up in preamble. Couple things. So, with the county not participating, that doubles my resolve to see something happen. I think it's a big mistake on the county's part, but that's, in my opinion, it's worth, whatever. But we can consider floating a revenue bond to support infrastructure going into that site. Again, we can chase grant funds. We could look at general obligation bonds. Those need to go to the voter. I'm sorry. The revenue bonds don't need to go to the voter. And those are ways to go. But whatever it is, I think our opportunity here, and I've talked to SCDC and Cosmont, and I think what we need to do is just double down on our efforts to seek grants and consider the potential for floating a revenue bond, and see what we can make happen, because we've waited too long and we haven't seen any development.
Thank you.
Hi, Todd. My question is, would it be your recommendation, if the council decides to move forward, to get that advisory committee together, sans the county, as we have developed it, maybe with the EDC, and discuss which option is viable to fund this, maybe revenue bond or grants, and get the ball rolling that way? Host the meeting, see how we can effectively move forward and get the ball rolling. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, so a couple things. Typically, when an EIFD is formed, and if we've already formed it, it's the city, we have the members. Typically, what we do is call that group together for a meeting, and we have Cosmont in attendance to kind of talk through EIFD 101 and also talk about options to see things happen on these sites. And so that's part of it. I've been in conversations with Joe today, and he's given me a list of things that we need to talk about. He's just waiting for the word to put that together.
Thank you.
Okay, so Todd, the amount of money we have left to pay Cosmont, we got a grant to do this, I believe.
Correct.
Do you know how much is left?
So we're covered through the formation of the district, completely. That's what the EDA grant is for. And I confirmed that with Joe as well.
Okay. And we've talked before about since we're going to be losing a lot of acreage due to the county not participating and us not including the county lands in the Ski Bowl Drive area, Ski Village Drive area. What are your thoughts about putting acreage areas of land, city land north of Spring Hill as part of this EIFD if possible? In other words, trading acreage so that the overall district is still fairly large.
So if we did that, there are a couple things. We'd have to come back, if we're adding land, we need to come back and amend the, amend the EIFD map and readopt the EIFD and go through that process, which is fine. The gist is if you add in more city properties, that allows, on one side, it allows you to reap more increment over the life of the district. What it does is it also creates more competition between the properties that are in in the EIFD that want things to happen, which is fine. I mean, that's what the Public Finance Board is designed for, is to make decisions about what's in, what's not. And the purpose of that board is to pick projects that are most likely to generate new increment. That's how you maximize an urban renewal area or tax increment finance or EIFD. So it's up to the discretion of council. It's not a bad idea. It could create more competition, but it does add more increment.
Thank you. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, following up on that, we'd have to eliminate or remove the county properties from the EIFD, which we have tentatively put in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So to the extent that we are removing those, we might at the same time modify to add some other city properties.
And a possible amendment to increase.
And in terms of the mayor asked about the Shasta 1 properties, which are currently outside the city, but have, for some recent periods of time, expressed an interest in being annexed into the city. Once they are annexed into the city, then the authority could again modify the map to include those properties. Is that true or not?
So a couple things. So a couple points, small ones. If you're removing properties from the EIFD, you do not need to come back and readopt the EIFD. If you're adding properties, you do. Which is fine. It's not hard. It's perfectly doable. So that's just one point of order. The owner of One Shasta wants to be annexed into the city. In one of the Board of Supervisors meeting, one of the supervisors intimated that he's not interested in any annexation of that property into the county. And what I've said to the developer is, with the zoning in the county the way it is, if you want to do housing out there, you're never going to get it to pencil given the size of the lots. And so I've asked him to reach out to the county and to the supervisors. But ultimately, and I talked to John Kenny about this today, is if you, the only way that we're going to be paid attention to, and I need to relay this to the owner tomorrow, is you need to have a concrete plan for the development of that site, specifically how you want it zoned, what you want where, and then you need to take it to LAFCO and then let the supervisors deny it there. Then you have something that if you need to, you can sue them.
Well, it wouldn't just be the supervisors at LAFCO. If I recall correctly, LAFCO has three representatives from the county, and I think maybe 4 from the cities. But there is a split.
Yeah, I know that a member of the city council down in Dunsmuir is the president of LAFCO now. I'm not sure the exact number of the makeup, but it's worth a shot. And I think it's a good idea. I don't think it's going to work out in the owner's favor unless he is annexed into the city. So we may want to consider keeping that property in, but then if we do, until that annexation happens, we're subject to the 50-50 cost sharing on that property.
And that is one question that I had also is, can we keep that county property in the EIFD that the city forms, even though it is in the county?
Yes, but my suggestion was we don't move towards doing any projects within on that property until the annexation happens.
Got it.
Or
Yeah, exactly.
Or amend the EIFD at such a time after the annexation happens, so we're not subject to it, de facto. So I think that would be preferable. to add it after.
So remove those parcels and then add them back in later, after annexation? Okay.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. All right, so I think the council members have asked their questions. We move on to public comment for this subject. Anyone from the audience? This is an EIFD, Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District item in the agenda. Would you like to comment on this at all? Moving over to Zoom.
We have one hand raised, and that speaker is Laurel Harkness.
All right, Laurel. You have 3 minutes, Laurel, if you're ready.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laurel Harkness. I serve on the board of the Mount Shasta Fire Protection District. I also serve on the Siskiyou LAFCO. My day job is as the director of a Western States works at the nexus of rural development and landscape resilience. I've been tracking the landing for a while now and the current conversation about the proposed EIFD, and I've worked with a number of other rural communities in California and across development, capacity building, and specifically mechanisms for communities to access funding through both the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. I've also worked with Senator Daly to successfully expand the Sierra Nevada Conservancy region to include the city of Mount Shasta and the landing. Since that region adjustment in 2022, over $5 million in grant funding has been awarded to projects in South Siskiyou County. Specific to this agenda item, I noted the suggestion in the staff report of consideration of a revenue bond with potentially the fire department infrastructure as collateral. It occurred to me that the city may not have a debt management policy, which would put some boundaries around the circumstances in terms where a debt financing option would be considered. And in fact, if the city doesn't have a debt management policy, I would think that this would be a great time to develop one. In 2022, I partnered with the EPA Brownfields program here in California to work with a team of graduate students on a study to evaluate 208 former sawmill sites in California for the potential to prioritize these sites for revitalization. I'm now working across a network of technical experts, institutional investors, and philanthropic partners with a shared objective of siting small log wood utilization facilities in rural communities across the West. The landing, quite frankly, is an absolutely prime location. This sort of small, quiet, light industrial sawmill will require only a small footprint, 10 to 30 acres, depending on the configuration, and it'd fit well alongside commercial, recreational, and residential uses. The wood industry experts and investors are highly interested in considering the landing in Mount Shasta. It's a prime location, but I've let them know that there's no the site, no existing plan with broad community support that I know of. And there's not been an inclusive and equitable community engagement process to develop a vision and a plan. But you know what, we can do this and we should do this. There's funds available for this sort of community visioning, and I'd certainly be happy to assist as needed. Considering the currently available federal funding options, this would be a perfect time for the city to support community-led planning effort for the landing. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Appreciate that. No one else? All right, so we will close public comment on item number 8 and continue the discussion amongst council members. Who's got strong ideas? Go ahead. Doesn't.
I just wanted to bring us back to when this beautiful idea came around a few months ago, or maybe longer. We were pretty excited to do this regardless of the county support. I think the county support came with some definite pluses, but also some downsides that Todd had mentioned in his preamble to this agenda item. So personally, I'm very excited to see what we can do on our own. I know we have the resources. I think we need to utilize the strong minds of our city and people like Laurel Harkness that can lead us in the right direction, but I'm definitely in favor of moving forward.
Thank you. Tessa, Tim?
Yeah, actually, I think we've talked about EIFD for probably 4 or 5 years now. We or longer. And I think that we have the team to make it happen. When we first started, we were talking about EIFD for the city. I think we have enough properties, we have enough talent that it makes sense, from my perspective, to go forward with the city.
Well said, thank you. Any comments, Jeff?
There appears to be a number of financial options, and I'm certainly in favor of the EIFD. It's just that the situation appears that there's opportunities for developers to participate in different financial instruments, potentially in combination with an EIFD, that make it feasible for us to go forward by ourselves. And I certainly, whatever that way is, support moving forward.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So my comments. After the rejection by the county regarding the EIFD, and I, for one, and I think others were hurt by that, there's apparently a lack of vision there. Anyhow, I went into the packet from Cosmont, that fairly thick packet on the EIFD, and wanted to see what the actual percentage of property taxes would end up being part of the TIF. It's about 7%. So if there's $1 million in tax increment, $7,000 would go to the city. So that's just an example, right? $1 million, 10% would be 70,000. Yeah, okay, 70,000, correct. I was correct the first time. So it's something. My concern is just the amount of acreage. That the more acreage that is part of the EIFD, the better. So we're fairly set on eliminating, based on the recommendation of the city manager, of eliminating the county properties and putting them back in after annexation. Okay, I agree with that. I think some deep thoughts should be made, and some research done on including more acreage north of Spring Hill. How far or how much can be determined. If it's too much of a hassle to do that, maybe we just continue with what we have. But I think that city managers should look at that deeply. But for sure, I want to continue with the process that we've started.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, for folks who aren't familiar with Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, this is a form of being able to raise development funds post redevelopment. So we had a redevelopment act in California that was done away with. It was a way of helping to develop properties. After it was done away with, the state legislature realized, or state government realized, there was a need for a replacement, and they replaced it with this vehicle called Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about increasing taxes on anyone. It is a way of accumulating taxes from development of property that can be used for further development without raising taxes on the property or anyone else. With that.
Yeah, so the other term is TIF, T-I-F, tax increment financing, and the increased tax on a property in this case would be dedicated to what the district decides to do with that money. So if, with respect to the landing, there are infrastructure costs that can be covered by the tax increment, that's one of the things that the increased property taxes could go towards. So it's a way of dedicating increased property taxes without increasing the rate on the property. So in the past, redevelopment was much more liberal and open, and I lived in San Jose when redevelopment was being used extensively, and museums were being built, hotels were being built partially with redevelopment funds or completely with redevelopment funds, depending on the case. Light rail lines, the arena that the San Jose Sharks play in, et cetera. Those type of things are not really allowed now with the EIFD. There are many more restrictions, and the amount of the tax increase that can be used towards projects is much less. For instance, the amount of tax increase that would go to school districts in the area affected is not allowed to be diverted to these projects. The county has decided not to be part of the EIFD, so the funds that would go to them normally will continue to go to them. It's our portion of the property tax will now be directed towards projects that the Public Financing Authority for this particular district decides.
Largely related to currently vacant property or underdeveloped property that then gets developed in the future.
Generally, yes. And that's what we're trying to do with the landing after 30 years, 30 plus years. 1989 it closed. Yeah. All right. If there's no further discussion, would someone like to make an official motion to continue this process?
Yes, I would love to. Yeah, and just to reiterate, I think it's our way to say that we are ready to play ball and welcome infrastructure and growth to our community, which I'm proud of. And I wrote an email just for transparency to all of the Board of Supervisors following their voting it down, and that was maybe 3 weeks ago, and not one person has written me back. So with that, I will move to approve reinstating the city's interest in moving forward in the EIFD process as demonstrated by City Manager Mr. Uhas.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, 4-0 vote on continuing with the EIFD process. Moving on to item number 9 in the agenda. First reading of ordinance CCO-24- number to be decided. City Council compensation. City managers, again, the initial reporter on this item. Go ahead, Todd.
Yes, so we talked about this at the last meeting. There is, under Government Code 36502, there is recently updated legislation that allows city councils to decide to update the amount that they're compensated for their monthly time up to an amount above $900 plus no more than 5% increase per year. We talked about if, we have the, under this government code, if you are going to raise city council pay, you have the option of going out to a vote. We talked about if we were going up substantially, that would probably be a good idea. In this case, there was a proposal to raise the current amount from $220 to $300 a month, and I'm bringing that back for consideration.
All right, let's remain disciplined, clarifying questions, and only clarifying questions. Okay, we'll move right into public comment then. We'll start with the folks in the hall. Anybody in the current audience, when our numbers have increased, nice. Anybody interested in commenting on this item? Come on up, state your name and where you reside.
My name is Glenn Kaufman. I live in the city, 620 South Mount Shasta Boulevard. And I want to read something from your Mount Shasta City Council protocols that, according to your website, was updated, I think, lastly in 2018. okay? Under the section 5.1, it reads, in accordance with state law, the council may increase salaries, provided that the amount of such increase may not exceed an amount equal to 5% for each calendar year from the operative date of the last adjustment. And I don't know if there's been any adjustments since 2018, but I did some math from the numbers. You were $137.50 a month in 2018. And if you add 5% per year for that, up until 2024, you end up with $185 a month proposed. Now, the protocols, as I understand it, are voluntary words that you as council members decide to honor, again, voluntarily, but even if you were to go back retroactively and make that a 10% increase, you end up somewhere about $267 a month for 2024. So the idea of going to $300 a month, I'll give you that. I think that's pretty good. I like that concept. All right, but now the next thing I want to talk about is, for one, I don't understand how much time you guys spend monthly on what you do, a dedicated council member. That would be wise to know, especially if this is also going to come up for a vote to further increase compensation under your Proposition 11, I think, in here. So other than that, that's what I have to say. That these are your words, not mine. They're ones that you put into place and that you said you would voluntarily agree to. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? No. All right. Well, moving over to the Zoom. All right, let's bring this back, a closing public comment on the item number 9. We'll bring this back to council for discussion.
Mayor, through the chair.
Go ahead.
Finance Director, could you indicate how much the current compensation is for council members and why the number of $80 increase to $300 a month was determined?
Did we determine the last one? Was that the last meeting?
Thank you. Didn't push the button. Anyway, I'm not sure why it went from 220 to 300. I don't. The discussion dealt with using the 5%, I believe, and some rounding, and I think that's where the number came from. So at this point, it's at 220 to 300 per month per the report.
Yeah, the current salary, if you would, of city council members is $220 a month. And perhaps, Todd, can you expand upon that?
Oh, yeah. The reason it's back at $300 a month is because that's what was proposed at the last city council meeting. So it's a number derived by city council, and so you're voting on what you guys proposed at the last meeting.
All right, so at the last meeting, we talked about starting at 220, which was the stipend in 2017. Yeah, I do remember that increase.
To the chair.
And then 5% a year comes out to approximately $300. Probably need to start that on July 1st, though, of 2024, that type of thing. But that's where it comes from, 5%, 5%, 5%, 5%. So, yeah, go ahead, Tessa.
That was all I was going to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gentleman asked how many hours a month we work. Speaking personally, about 30 hours a month in slow times, 50 hours a month in about average times. And then there's those peaks like the 4 years of Crystal Geyser or cannabis laws passing, other topics where all of a sudden it jumps up pretty close to a full-time job. But that ought to give you a frame of reference for how much we have to do.
Continuing with that point that Jeff made, it also depends on how many ad hoc committees you happen to be part of, how many committees you're a part of outside of city council, which are typically volunteer, but could be considered part of your city council duties. For me, I am part of the Collier Interpretive and Information Center Board, completely volunteer, and they need a representative from the City Council of Mount Shasta, and I am that person because I happen to work out of Wairika, and they are very biased towards North County with respect to where their meetings are and where the center is. So I'm the person for that. Just as an example, I had to go to a meeting in Tule Lake on my own gas and come back. So that was, I don't know, it was like 5 hours at least, maybe 6 round trip plus gas. So there are things like that. Tessa?
Don't forget the library.
So then there are less ad hoc oriented meetings, which are examples would be the Library Expansion Committee. That's where we're trying to decide what to do with the library expansion project, which has been on and off since 2016. Yeah, 2016. When I started this in 2016, it was already an issue.
Since about 2000.
Okay. It sounds like Jet's been keeping track. I have not. But I will go along with what he says with respect to total hours. A lot of reading and double checking of things that will be an issue. Jeff was referencing the cannabis issue. That was a 2017. Yes, and then Crystal Geyser was 20. I wasn't.
12 through 16.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, and then it kind of continued beyond that. There was a housing element issue that was just controversial as those two, possibly more. And so there's a lot of reading of emails and so forth.
Well, and we have 2 council members here. So periodically there are subcommittees formed of the council members. For example, the current mayor and the former mayor both sit on a subcommittee having to do with the transportation plan, which I think has taken up a number of hours as well. So hopefully that gives folks some idea.
Okay, so let's talk amongst ourselves as to whether we feel good about this increase or not. And then we need a motion if we're going to go take this to a second reading.
Well, I will say that I think it is appropriate. Again, it has been several years since there has been any modification of city council wages or city council salary. We have been at $220 for a number of years. I am the council member that this will least affect because my term ends in November. I don't plan to run again, so I don't really stand to gain from supporting this. And at the same time, I think it is much needed. And in all fairness, to the people who do serve, they ought not to be receiving a compensation that is far below minimum wage. None of the people that I know who've sat on city council have chosen to do this job, which is really public service, for the purpose of making a lot of money. And at the same time, none of them ought to be demeaned. So I would like to, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a, oh, okay. I guess there is further discussion.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yep.
Councilmember Stearns brought up that this is public service, and that is my perspective. To cut to the bottom line, and then I'll backfill, I'm against this increase. I don't think it's anything but reasonable from an objective point of view. Going from 220 to 300 is minimal, given the 4-ish years that we've been at 220. I think it's 4 years. Yeah. But for me, the point is, to the extent that we can keep money out of the equation of public service, I believe we increase the ability that our judgment on individual agenda items isn't affected by money. And that's kind of an old-fashioned way of looking at things. And I'm old, such that it has defined my position.
To the chair. I would like to, I look at it a little differently. One is I would like to lose less money, have it pay for things like gas and that type of thing, like Mayor was suggesting, the travel. I do agree with Councilmember Collins in the sense that the true essence of what we do is volunteer, and this does not compensate us for the many, many hours that we put in, but maybe makes it a little more appealing for those that are thinking about running in the next election, or a little less painful on their pocketbook to travel.
Well, the mayor may have comments, but I have one more if I may.
No, I have no comments.
All right. One good reason to increase this by $80 a month is to perhaps encourage people who might not otherwise be able to afford to give public service in this way, that financial opportunity. It costs money for babysitters. It costs money to drive to Tule Lake and back, or to Wairika and back. And to the extent that we can encourage a greater, even a small part of the greater population to consider providing public service without losing money, we ought to do it. My thoughts. So with that, I would like to move the first reading of ordinance CCO-24, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta, amending Chapter 2.22.010 of Title II of the Mount Shasta Municipal Code to increase council member compensation from $220 to $300 by title only.
Oh, effective date?
The first reading. To the second reading.
Effective date? Would you like to put that as part of the motion?
Yeah.
There we go. So that's automatic.
It'd be November.
Hold your motion. You're almost done with that motion. For your skeptics and cynics out there, those of us on this council board are not benefiting from this.
Except for Jeffrey.
Say that one more time.
The council members on this board that possibly are leaving will not be benefiting from this at all. So just in case they were thinking it was taking effect next month.
Well, I hope that I'm the only one who's leaving.
I got to think hard about that.
Mayor, we're not doing that.
Go ahead and finish this.
I think that is sufficient.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Opposed?
Does the clerk have the count? Very good. Passes 3-1 and is moved to a second reading. All right. Moving on to the big item here. Is there any way to tell how many public commentators you have on this, Kathy, the next item?
I don't have any hands raised yet.
Really? Because I was going to say we take a break, a 5-minute break before this one starts, just in case it's a long one. All right, let's do that. 5-minute break. We'll start back up at 6:30, right on the money. So there you go. All right, let's restart the meeting, folks. 6:31. Item number 10, public hearing, recommended findings of California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA exemption and adoption of 2023 to 2031 housing element update. Jeff Mitchum, our planning director, will take the floor on this.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. City Manager Todd might want to say just something very briefly before I kick it off, so I'll defer to Todd.
Yeah, so just to give the high-level overview, the City Council and the Planning Commission adopted a housing element that was submitted to Housing and Community Development, and these, what you're seeing in front of you are essentially the comments that we need to make to address the concerns of the HCD for them to certify our housing element. And we need a certified housing element to chase grants and be compliant with state law. So these are, they're just addressing what the state wants to see from the city.
Thank you. So I'll defer to Michelle Nielsen, who's with us, who's with Plan West Partners. She has the institutional memory and longstanding presence with this document. So first, I will overview the staff report, which I've queued up for all those participants at home to see. I've highlighted some of the salient portions, and I'll walk through this very briefly with you, and then pause at the end after we highlight some of the key components of it, take some questions, and if you want us to go into a deep dive on point-by-point changes, we are prepared to do that. But I think I'll give you a break just to digest a bit. So with that, this item is the adoption of the 2023-31 housing element with two sets of findings that are contained as attachments. The first is that there is a valid CEQA exemption that applies, that is called the no-nonsense CEQA exemption. And additionally, that the document complies, substantially complies with state housing element law. And finally, you're directing staff to send it back to HCD for their final review and hopefully certification. The recommendation is summarized, again, in two parts. You've got the environmental review component, so make sure that that's part of your motion this evening. And as a secondary item is the compliance with HCD's findings as conveyed in the attachment, which was a letter dated September 5th. Before I get into it any deeper, I want to hit some reminders here for you. First of all, the housing element is a policy document that does not amend our municipal code. Forthcoming municipal code amendments are coming next. That's the heavy lift post-adoption of any general plan amendment. The housing element drives compliance downstream in the form of our municipal code. So you'll see lots of amendments in here coming over the next housing element cycle, which is 8 years. Most of that change will take place in the next 2 to 4 years. And you'll notice that in the policy chapter, which is chapter 2, there are specific timelines for those changes. The revisions herein are explicitly responsive to HCD's findings for compliance with state housing element law. The revisions do not go above and beyond HCD comments and/or current state law. The current municipal code provisions for discretionary review, such as conditional use permits and design review, for which the Planning Commission is the design review body, remain in effect for market rate housing development proposals. And finally, policy references to what are called quote unquote qualifying housing projects as defined by state law is and will be a moving target. That's why the operative term underlined as defined by state law is important to remember. Since 2017, there have been over 100 bills signed into law by 2 governors. Suffice it to say that over the next housing element cycle of 8 years, we will continue to see changes to state housing element law. It's important that we not be isolated with respect to a policy statement that holds us to compliance with law that's going to be obsolete in 12 or 16 months. That's why that key phrase, as defined by state law, it will change. And it's important that the policy reflect that. So note that the first qualifying component for any project to qualify as a qualified affordable housing project is that it currently complies as proposed with all provisions in the municipal code and the general plan. That means it can't be on top of a wetland. It can't be on preserved open space. It can't be in conservation easements. It can't violate noise standards in our general plan. All those still apply. That's the entry level to a qualifying housing project. You don't pass it, you don't get it. If you're a qualifying housing project pursuant to state law, you are likely an affordable housing project by a certain standard, again, that will likely change, but presently it is 15% of affordability, and it changes depending upon your performance as a jurisdiction with respect to our regional housing needs assessment, which is an annual requirement, and we report to the state how we're doing on that. That ministerial review at a staff level must be done concurrent or pursuant to objective design standards. And you'll notice that objective design standards appear a lot in this document. Those are not adopted yet. We currently have a Planning Commission subcommittee, which will meet for its second time this Wednesday, the subject of which will be creating those objective design standards, hopefully to be adopted by you all after public review by community and Planning Commission public hearing process, concurrent with HCD's review. So we're accelerating this a little bit to make sure that we don't have a gap between subject review for ministerial projects to a set of standards that don't exist yet. Had we scheduled this differently, we may not have that compressed timeline, but we do. We're making the best with what we've got. With that, I'll walk through the staff report real quickly for you. We have done some highlighting so that you can track the changes since you've last seen this document. There's red and green, bold and underlining. You can see what that means there. Most importantly, though, is the yellow highlighted is what comes from you as far as recommendations goes from your Planning Commission. And I'll touch briefly on what those are since you've last seen the document. Changes in Chapter 1 mostly relate to HCD's comments to better explain how public comments were incorporated into the document. Chapter 2 is the heavy lift. That's where we've got programs that drive council, Planning Commission, and staff action over this next housing cycle. And that's where 99% of our comments from the public are, and an equivalent amount of focus from the Planning Commission as well. There were no changes to Chapter 3, which is the previous housing element analysis. Appendix A, which is needs assessment, housing constraints, and the assessment of fair housing, did have some revisions, mostly related to quantifying objectives for milestone targets for achieving success in this next housing element cycle. And then finally, Appendix E was revised primarily clerically to make a few changes with respect to typos and other non-substantive reviews. I'm going to touch real briefly on the process. This entire process began in April of 2023 when the draft housing element was published on the city's website. Between April and May, there were a handful of revisions to the document as in response to public review. On May 22nd of 2023, the City Council, you all reviewed the document, provided some feedback. That feedback was incorporated into the document, and we submitted it to HCD for their first 90-day review. And finally, on September 5th, 2023, we received HCD's comment letter, and over the course of the past 3 months or so, staff have been busy in responding and presenting to Planning Commission on November 28th, where they made some recommended revisions for you to consider, and those are highlighted in yellow throughout the document. Here we are on January 8th, 2024. Upon your support and direction, staff will distribute this document back to HCD for what we hope will be their final review. I want to be clear, and finally, that the document has been found to be exempt from CEQA. This is a well-tested exemption, particularly for documents like ours, which do not result in any substantive density or intensity changes by our municipal code. So as a policy document goes, as a discretionary action by you, the common sense exemption is well tested and has withstood many such notices of determination without challenge. With that, I will draw your attention to attachments 3 and 4. This is where I'm going to pause. Attachment 3 is a summary matrix that describes staff's changes to our document since you last saw it. It's organized with columns based on the substance of the comment, the nature of the response, and in some, staff feel that the changes therein, as I mentioned at the outset, do clear the bar for HCD requirements. They do not go above and beyond. It's possible that HCD could come back and be nitpicky again. I've seen it 3 times before. But I'm hopeful that this will be a certifiable document. And then finally, attachment 4 summarizes for you Planning Commission's comments and recommendations. I'll pause, respond to your questions and comments, and as I said, Michelle Nielsen is with me to respond in detail should you decide to go there.
Very much, Jeff. We'll go to clarifying questions by council members. Jeff, did you want us? No. Tim, go ahead.
So for the public's benefit, HCD stands for Housing and Community Development?
That is correct. California Department of.
Okay. And this process, the housing element is part of the general plan, which has to be periodically updated. And every time we review or we update the general plan or any element of the general plan, those updates must go to the State Department, Housing and Community Development, for purpose of conformity with state law. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So this is the process that we've gone through various times before, periodically, and we're going through it again. As you pointed out, one of the hot subject matters in the last few years has been housing. And there have been a lot of bills with a lot of new laws, changes in the law that our updated housing element must conform with, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And because this is a document and not a project in terms of breaking ground, it is exempt from CEQA review, correct?
Correct.
Jeff. Tessa.
I just wanted to reiterate that it's before us because the Planning Commission has vetted it, added their comments, and it is now before us.
Correct, yes. And those recommended revisions are contained in the document in totality before you and referenced as well. So you'll see attached are chapters 1 through 3, and there's a link to the appendix, which are hundreds of pages. So
Thank you.
it's all there.
One final question. Are we under some sort of deadline to submit this to HCD?
No, that's long gone.
Okay.
So there's nothing that's looming ominously on the horizon with respect to compliance threshold for us, no.
Okay. Go ahead, Tim.
One more question, follow on that. If the city doesn't have a current approved housing element, the city doesn't qualify for state funding for grants, correct?
We are at jeopardy for not qualifying for competitive grants, yes.
Which is one of the reasons to move forward with this.
Indeed.
That's a good point. All right. Moving on to public hearing. Okay, we're going to open public hearing on this item. We'll start with the folks in the audience here at the hall. Would anyone like to come up and comment on this item? I see one hand. Come on up, state, and then we have a second person. State your name and just a town you live in. Don't need your street address.
I have a housing issue to discuss, and I did not understand what this policy was, whatever that change is.
Your name and...
My name is Patricia Krogan.
And you're from Mount Shasta? From Mount Shasta?
Yes, I am. I've been here for 2 years. I would just like to alert you to something that's going on now in Mount Shasta that came across my path, and I think you should know about it, having to do with housing. There's a huge corporation, mega corporation with many shells that has bought the 2 mobile home parks here. It's called Boa Vida, Boavida. They are predatory. They've had $1 million judgments waged against them on behalf of the residents, only to go to appeals court, which just wipes it out. So what's going on is I went to their investors page, and the program is in 6 years they would like to create $60 million of rent increases. In year 5, there'll be a 118% increase. And then they'll go right back down so no one will notice. But at any rate, the people that are in your mobile home parks are going to not be able to afford this. They're going to have twice yearly increases. This is according to their investor pages. And again, they're just so huge. They're making it's a pay-to-play deal, right? So an investor has to buy a mobile home park, and then he's part of the deal, and they all are guaranteed 14 to 15% interest or recovery on their investment. Once they get their investment fully paid for, then they begin to share in the profits. But that's the aggressive thing they want to do. In 6 years, they want to have made $60 million. So they have huge amount of mobile home parks in California, all across the United States. And they have about 50 investors who are a shell of many other investors. And anyway, so I'm just kind of warning you that this is what's going to happen. I have an RV, so I can drive away. They tried to attempt this on me without the proper notice, and so I have a legal background, so I barked about it ferociously, and they backed down. But I can see that everyone else has a mobile home. You'll see the cases online, the lawsuits online, where all the residents came together because they had raised the rent so many times. It went from like $800 to $1,500. This is all in California. And then they lost the homes they had paid for, literally paid for their mobile homes. So it's an elderly abuse thing. But anyway, that's who's in your town now. And they just are starting this rollout right now. So I was going to encourage you that there are creative ways to stop them, right? But I don't believe if it goes to the state level, you will ever be able to stop them. It needs to be stopped here. One of those ways is to suspend their license to operate. The state legislature that just got passed this last year is their game. I know they had lobbyists to pass all that legislation. I know they do because it ends in 2030, which is exactly 6 years when they would realize their profit. I feel like that needs to be rescinded, that whole legislation. Anyway, so BOAVIDA, look at their investors page, and it's here, and it's going to take away all these people, make them homeless. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that information.
The public hearing, I'd like to ensure that the staff report is complete. We don't want to have public hearing until the entire staff report has been presented.
Oh, yeah, that is the conclusion of my report, unless you had questions about...
I had members in the audience
Yeah.
questioning that, so I just wanted to be certain. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so staff report is complete. Clarifying questions by council complete. We're on public hearing now, so we're good. All right. So there was a second hand. Come on up. I know you stated your name and...
Glenn Kaufman. longtime property owner in Mount Shasta City. Thank you. So in regards to the concept that the housing element adoption will not have a significant effect on the environment, I have to strongly disagree with that. And again, I point to the protocols, and in your protocols, under your ethics part of it, it's mentioned that the city council is supposed to not only just follow the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And under section 2.4, the city of Mount Shasta zoning ordinance, which also goes along with the general plan and the housing element, so on, is designed to promote excellence of design in all future developments, not just some, and to preserve the internal beauty and established character of the city. Again, this isn't your words, these are not mine, all right? To me, when I pick apart this housing element, I find a whole lot of wiggle room for the idea that it will not preserve the internal beauty and established character of our city, nor will it promote excellence of design, especially if the ability to decide what that beauty and character will entail falls into fewer and fewer hands. So please, I know money is important. I know the idea of having the funds to do things, but again, we have a very special character and design in this town. And to toss it away, well, frit it away easily for the idea of not losing money, I know that's a hard thing to think about, but 5 or 10 years or 20 years down the line, what is this town going to look like? Or what is this city going to look like? And I really want you guys to back up and maybe think about the idea. Again, you may have passed the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law would say, do the CEQA things, do what is necessary to get the whole city behind you, not just the ones that can decipher the legalese. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any more commentators from the hall here? All right, move on to this.
We have 2 hands raised. Our first speaker will be Beverly Harlan.
All right, Beverly, stay where you live, please. Beverly, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Beverly. Are you from Mount
Okay.
Shasta? Are you from Mount Shasta?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, couldn't figure out how to unmute. My name is Beverly Harlan. I've been a resident of Mount Shasta for almost 14 years. We all care about this community, so we deserve a meticulous review regarding CEQA in preparing the housing element. 28 California cities have complied with CEQA in the housing element, including the city of Calistoga, where our current planning director is from. I've reviewed the 2 documents totaling 29 pages that were sent to you via email from Dale DeForest. Dale has been following Mount Shasta planning architectural review for nearly 4 decades. I'm hoping and trusting that you all have read those 2 documents. However, in case you and the general public may not have read them, here are some highlights from those 29 pages, starting on page 5. Mount Shasta's failure to include any objective design standards, unlike what Calistoga did to get its housing element approved, triggers additional mandatory CEQA review requirements. Page 8, Mount Shasta's housing element update would remove all aesthetic protections for new multifamily residences. Page 10, Program HO 2.4.2 may create significant problems when delegating too much design authority to the city planner. Page 11, Program HO 2.3.7 deceives the public into believing that market rate housing projects will not be exempt from design review. Page 12, Program HO 2.3.7 also deceives the public that, quote, objective design standards, unquote, will adequately protect the public when applied secretly behind closed doors at City Hall. Also, page 12, proposed housing element update is unlawful because it would be inconsistent with the general plan's other elements. Page 15, housing element would be inconsistent with general plan's protections for the Spring Hill area and the Roseburg property. Page 16, California does not require removal of design standards when adopting a housing element update. Page 17, there's 25 cities that have prepared CEQA reviews for their housing element. And there's a list of them. The draft housing element will lead to potentially significant environmental harm, including serious aesthetic impacts. This draft housing element update must be revised and subjected to CEQA review to protect our community and local environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beverly.
Our next speaker will be Peggy Risch.
Okay, Peggy, start when you're ready.
Okay. Well, first of all, good evening. And it's actually your first City Council meeting in 2024. So Happy New Year. I think that you probably all received my comments, and based on your previous statements about your compensations, all of you are on the council because you care about Mount Shasta and you care how we grow. I've heard tonight how pretty much all of you are pro-development, pro-growth, and you know, there's nothing wrong with being for development. The question that I want you to consider is, how do we grow and who makes those decisions? Because if you approve this housing element as it is currently constructed, much of those decisions will be made behind closed doors, what they call ministerial review by our city planning department, and not in a public, transparent process. And the problem with that is because, as Jeff pointed out, we don't have, and we would not have the objective design standards that developers, that we could ask them to do. And that's because they would be eliminated in this housing element. So you have to consider, is it important for you to pause, get those objective standards down so that as Mount Shasta grows, we can actually control and have those standards that we can show to the developers and say, this is what we want. This is how we would like our town to grow. And those standards would be crafted in a way that they do not impose excessive cost on the developers. That would be very clear. And so what are we talking about? Another 6 months to get those objective standards down, and then they're there. Then you can submit this housing element with those objective standards, because if you skip that step, then we have no objective design standards and there is nothing to control how we grow and what it looks like. So that's what I want you to consider. As you all know, the 2045 general plan, this was a really hot issue. We had hundreds of people show up to express their love for this community and how we all care. All of you sitting there care. I know you do. So I just ask you to pause and, you know, go through this housing element carefully and delay. I wouldn't approve it tonight. And you read my letter for my other comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Any others?
Our next speaker will be Vicki Gold.
Okay, Vicki, go ahead and start when you're ready.
Thank you. I agree with everything that has been said. I'm from Mount Shasta. I particularly wanted to point out that what Glenn stated about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law with regard to avoiding CEQA and giving them a pass, I think that is extremely important. We are a very special town. You know that. We know that. It's not easy to live here always, but it's worth it. And the way that the community has backed and, you know, through many of your work over the years in city council and planning commissions, et cetera, it's led to this beautiful place that we call home. I really agree that we should ask that you not make a decision tonight. I would like to see those objective standards in place after the Planning Commission subcommittee meets next or this Wednesday. I think it should go back to the Planning Commission because, in effect, their responsibility for determining some of these projects, whether they will be according to appropriate design standards, architectural and otherwise, they're being left out of this for all multifamily plans, some of which could be really egregious in this community. Because you're right, the state does constantly increase all of the regulations, as you pointed out, hundreds of bills over the last few years, and they will continue to do so. But to say, well, we'll be fixing this over the next 2 to 8 years, yes, we know we'll have to do that, but I think it's very important to get that in place before we do this. Otherwise, it's putting the cart before the horse. And I do think that this goes beyond what the state has required. I also think, stressing again what was in Dale's letter as well as Beverly's comment, going over the points, 28 other cities have done an ISMND, and I think we deserve that in this community. The initial public notice was not really adequate when the Planning Commission met. This time it was, and so we appreciate that. But I think to really be in compliance, in this case with the letter of the law, it would be best to postpone this till there's another, to a special meeting, especially after the Planning Commission gets to go back and see that all of those recommendations and revisions are really there. There were quite a few of them. They're still working on it. And I think it's extremely essential that that happen. I know we're a community and we all care. We appreciate all of the hard work that's done, but it shouldn't be just ministerial, because the state requires that you give double density, increase in the height if you have taking good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
Our next speaker is Lisa Diane.
All right, Lisa, start when you're ready.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Are you from Mount Shasta?
Thank you. Yes, I am from Mount Shasta, and I haven't had time to prepare a more in-depth statement, but I do very much agree with Beverly, Peggy, Glenn, and what Vicki has said, that we do need those design standards. I am a building designer, trained in design, having worked in city jurisdictions, and I understand the value of long-term visioning along with the short-term needs. So, while I think it's great to be able to take advantage of, the funds that can come in to help with housing, I think that there absolutely should be design standards, the CEQA, in place for, as a guidance for how we move forward with designs in the city. It will totally affect the character of the city long-term. The value can be assessed by having a really coherent vision with all members of the community that have time to have input. And then it would be guided by something that is really appropriate to Mount Shasta, not so much perhaps a city staff member who might have great design values but might not really represent what Mount Shasta is what would be most appropriate for Mount Shasta to enhance the community, to hold a vision for the long term. So that's really all I want to say, and I thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And that's it. One more time for people in the audience. No, you get one opportunity. No. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So the public hearing is hereby closed.
bring the discussion back to council. And Tim?
Some of the comments I heard, and I certainly read through Dale LaForce's lengthy comments. Some of the comments I heard seem to suggest a fear or thinking that if this housing element is adopted, or by the adoption of the housing element, we are throwing out existing design standards, existing plans that we have made for the city over decades. That's not my understanding, but I'd like to get comments from the planning director.
So there's nothing in the adoption action before you tonight which amends the current municipal code. The current municipal code has a number of triggers in it for discretionary review of housing and any other form of development proposal. Those provisions are conveyed in our conditional use chapter and in our design review chapter. All those will still apply for market rate and non-housing projects. I'd like to clarify one thing that I may have skipped over just a bit in the staff report, that the clock is already ticking. Our document was due in February of 2022. Okay, so we're late. 90% of the jurisdictions in the state of California were late. Most of the 6 cycle housing elements in Northern California are in the same boat. It's upwards of 75% are over a year late. Okay, it's not uncommon. HCD's review times are longer. Staff consulting teams are overloaded, et cetera. So there's lots of good reasons, maybe not valid excuses, but nonetheless, we're late. What that does not do is exempt us from a project that could come in tomorrow that qualifies per the definition I gave earlier as an affordable housing project that needs to be or could be approved by objective design standards. There isn't a magic wand that's waved when we certify, or excuse me, when we adopt this housing element, which starts that clock ticking. It's already ticking. So we need, staff's recommendation is clear, Planning Commission's recommendation is clear. We need to move quickly and rapidly with objective design standards regardless of adoption. Adoption is essentially putting a cherry on top of it, but we need to get there. So we need to get moving.
A couple more questions. If I understand correctly, staff is already working on design standards as a follow-up to the adoption of the housing element. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, I have been on city council for over 23 years. I frankly don't remember how many housing element revisions the city has gone through in that period of time. But my recollection is that we have typically adopted the new housing element or amended housing element, and then thereafter done a number of design standard changes or modifications to ordinances to enact, fulfill, carry forward the city's vision. Is that commonplace?
Conventional process, yes, is that the policy document and the general plan, those elements are changed, amended, updated periodically pursuant to state law, and then that kicks loose compliance with municipal code. Sometimes dozens of ordinances are triggered, and conventionally, yes. Design review is one of those. However, this time around, since 2017 and SB 35, which was the state housing law package, as you well know, changed the legal landscape a bit. And I think that's probably why Mount Shasta and Calistoga, my previous jurisdiction, were caught a little bit unawares. Our timing was off. And as a point of clarification, Calistoga still, as of publication of this staff report, as far as I know even right now, does not have a set of adopted objective design standards. They do, however, have a certified housing element and was adopted prior to my departure.
no comments other than I am ready to read when you are ready.
Okay, well, I have comments. So my take from the critics of this housing element is that there is a concern mostly about projects rated as affordable housing projects, and that once rated as an affordable housing project, the objective building standards and so forth will not apply, and possibly very ugly buildings and so forth will be built. Planning Director, you have any comments regarding that?
Yeah, let me, I'm going to share my screen. I prepared something in advance here. Bear with me while I attempt to change the view. Can someone on the technical side help me on this one? So that's the document I want to stop share and reshare. And I want to grab this one, share. Thank you. So what I've done here is compare the current design regulations and where they appear in city policy documents. So these are the current regulations that exist within our base zones chapter, which is 1816, our size restrictions chapter, which is 1870, the general plan itself, the conditional use chapter, which is 1829, and architectural review, which is 1860, and objective design standards, which are underway. I want to point out in box there that the base zones applies to all development in the city. If it does not, all development, regardless of size, needs I review it or city planner reviews it for compliance with 1816. The size restriction chapter appears to apply only to projects over 20,000 square feet, multifamily or residential and commercial included. Conditional use permit chapter applies to all multifamily development in excess of 4 units. And that's the code citation that I've included there. The general plan, as I mentioned earlier, applies to all projects. That needs to be, any project that we accept needs to comply with the general plan as a measure of a standard compliant project. 1860 design review applies to all development in the city with the exception of single-family, duplexes, and triplexes in R1 and R2. Initially, objective design standards will apply to affordable housing only, and then the question for all of us would be whether or not to upscale that to applicability for all development in the future. And that's a common step with all jurisdictions which have adopted objective design standards, is to make the choice about applying it to all development. It's a very effective way, a very measured and explicit way to review design review, as long as it's got the meat in it to give us the character that we want. In the table here, what I've done is show you in the far left column all of the regulations which apply to design. Density, lot coverage, parcel size, setback, height, lot size, vicinity considerations, infrastructure, health, safety, welfare, mountain village theme, broken up facades, screening of mechanical units, landscaping, glare, traffic circulation, lighting, architectural unity, street network, pedestrian network, parking and vehicles, storage, public frontage, loading, and ancillary uses. In the columns to the right, I've put check marks in each of those chapters that I identified previously where all of those regulations appear. And what you can see is that we've got lots of redundancy. 1860, our design review chapter, has all of the regulations which apply to the design-related standards. 1829, which is the conditional use permit chapter, has all of the standards which apply to development metrics such as lot coverage and density, so that's density and intensity. And then the general plan has a smattering of other related standards which are buried in various elements of the general plan. So noise, elements, circulation, open space, preservation, et cetera. And then finally, the objective design standards chapter, which is underway, would be a new municipal code chapter, which would tend to grab all of those under one document. And that's the idea, is it's a one source for all design-related and standards-related review. So hopefully that helps to answer your question a little bit.
Thank you, Jeff. Are we ready for a motion? I think so.
Kathy, this motion is about 4 pages, is that right? Do I have to do all the whereases?
I don't believe so. I think you can just follow the suggested motion that's on the agenda cover.
Or page 52.
Yeah, it's on page 1 of the staff report. There's the, under recommendation.
Page 52.
Oh, sorry, 52 of the packet, right.
Yeah, this one.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Make a motion to have City Council adopt the attached resolution approving environmental review, finding that the 2023-31 housing element update is exempt from the CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15061B3, as housing element adoption will not have a significant effect on the environment. Housing element update, adoption of the proposed update to the housing element of the city's general plan with findings that it is substantially complies with state housing element law, attachment 1 exhibit A, and submit to HCD for certification.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 4-0. Measure passes. Okay, back to the outline. All right, so that didn't take too long, so we're not going to take a break. All right, no break. All right. Item number 11, discussion and possible action regarding ballot measures to set term limits for council members and to increase city council compensation. Okay, so to the clerk, this, then below that, that header, it seems that this item is really more strictly about a ballot measure for term limits alone. The original intent in the pre-agenda meeting was for this to be a discussion piece amongst council members to figure out whether we wanted to create a ballot measure to set term limits and possibly a separate ballot measure, because I think you have to have single subject ballot measures. And so the second ballot measure under discussion would be whether to increase council salaries substantially based on increased workload, substantial increase in workload, as we discussed at the December 11th meeting. So are there limitations? So does an agenda item have to be single subject too? And so we can only really talk about term limits in this one?
You can discuss both ballot measures, whether or not you want to.
Proceed. Yeah, okay. All right, so Todd, go ahead and introduce this further.
Sure. Yeah, sorry for the confusion on this. Yeah, you stated it very eloquently. Essentially, this is bringing to council a consideration of adopting an ordinance limiting, based on council's input how many consecutive terms any member of council can serve. And once we adopt that ordinance, we would then send that off and it would have to be passed by the voters in a general election, so in November. So that is what's before you. It's, do you want to set term limits? And if so, how many consecutive term limits do you want to limit that to? And we would prepare an ordinance to that effect that would then go to the ballot to be passed or not passed by the voters.
All right, council members, clarifying questions regarding a ballot measure to set term limits.
I don't know that I have a question about that. There's been no determination as to first whether there ought to be, we haven't had a vote as to whether there ought to be or not limitation on number of years that a person can serve on city council. We really haven't had adequate discussion, as far as I'm concerned, as to the pros and cons. There are some, having attended League of City meetings, I've seen a number of council members from other cities who have attended, who have been on council for extended periods of time and are considered to be valuable. So we would have to determine as a council whether we support term limits, so to speak, or not. And if we do, then how many terms would be a maximum set of number of terms. Is that correct?
Correct.
And not necessarily consecutive is, yeah.
Well, this talks about consecutive terms.
I know, I would like to.
That's a good point.
Diverge from that and say that it's about total number of years or terms served and whether we want to limit that or not.
And I understand that at a prior council meeting, the mayor brought up a concern that if the compensation, the salaries for council members was increased dramatically, that might be a reason in of itself that people would want to serve on city council rather than doing it as a act of public service.
Right. My concern is that it would lead to entrenched incumbency. They would actually be serving for the compensation and work hard. I'm not saying that people in Congress do this, but apparently they do, in order to make money.
Well, what would happen if we have two ballots, if the Mount Shasta City Council puts two ballots on the ballot, two propositions on the ballot, one to set a maximum number of years a person can serve on city council, and the other one increase and voters vote in favor of one and not the other. What are the does it have to be a passage of both or none at all?
I think since we're undecided that we should let the voters vote.
Okay, so we're looking to see as a group whether this is a worthy ballot measure or measures. So as Tim just stated, one potential ballot measure is to set a limit on the number of terms, whether consecutive or not, that a citizen can serve on council. Since ballot measures need to be single subject, or they can be taken to court and, or they just won't get approved by the county clerk. I don't think it has to meet that test. So the second subject, the second ballot would be about increasing to the maximum was my suggestion, although we can talk about that next, $950 per month compensation with changes to increased workload, but that'd be a third subject. So I'm not sure where to go with this actually with respect to the compensation. I can't say I'm in favor of increasing beyond the 300 unless there are stated roles. In other words, beyond just going to a couple council meetings each month, that people do need to be involved with committees and so forth, and be liaisons to the committees that we're no longer allowing them to be involved with. So I'm looking at I'm actually more than hinting at the idea of increasing the workload, but also increasing the compensation. Again, I'm not sure that's it's not really a single subject, so I don't know how that would work.
Well, it does sound like it would be two ballot measures rather than one. I don't think I have any other questions for staff, and I think we have a lot to discuss as a council.
Yeah, so we'll go to public comment on this? Yeah. Okay. So let's go to public comment on this item, and we'll start public comment, right? It's not a hearing. Right. So anyone in the hall audience like to come up and speak their mind on this subject? No one here. How about online?
Yes. Our first speaker from home will be Peggy Risch.
Okay, Peggy, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. So I missed your previous discussions on this topic. So I just have a couple questions that maybe you could clarify for me and maybe other members of the community is how did it actually get prompted to actually have term limits? I don't have any opinion yet. I'm just curious how that topic came up and what the benefits of it would be, and potentially if there was any discussion of the downsides to that. So that's one question I have. The other question is, I know that from other propositions that are put forth on the California ballots, there's usually like dovetailing of different ones that can be actually counter to one another, or they can actually support one another. And as you say, Mayor Stackfleth, they are single topic measures that is required by law. And yeah, it becomes a crap shot how the voters will rule on those single ballot measures. So that's one. And the other question is, well, maybe you guys don't want to speak to it, but I know that Tim said he's not interested in running again, and I know that two other council members are their term expires, Mayor Stackfleth and Tessa Klur. And so I'm just curious if you could speak to what your feelings are about in terms of running and whether that would be influenced by your decision on this topic. And that's it. So more questions than opinions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peggy.
Our next speaker is Rosalind McCoy.
Okay, Rosalind, state the city you're from and start when you're ready.
I live here in Mount Shasta. I also have a question. Does this really have to go before the voters, or can city council just vote and enact this? Because if it goes before the voters, then the option of fine-tuning the term limit would have to go before the voters again. But if it was just our city council making these decisions, then things could be fine-tuned. So I guess that's more my question is, does it really have to go before the voters? And I would like to hear more of a discussion on term limits, pros and cons. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind, and I do believe it has to go before the voters. All right, we're going to close public comment at this point and bring it back to council for further discussion. So Tessa, what do you think about these different prospective ballot measures?
Yeah, so I think my personal biggest objective is enticing more of the public to come and run for council. Whether that's done with term limits and getting new faces up here to hear more opinions, or whether that's done with compensation incentive, I'm open to both or either or one. I do agree that managing the council and making sure that they are putting in the hours to earn the money is a tough position. It's a tough spot to handle that. I don't know that the voters can vote on you must have 20 hours per month of active work in the city, and who reviews that, that gets a little tricky. So I think it would be an honor code of, maybe by the mayor or a subcommittee of wanting your council members to at least serve on one subcommittee and come to the meetings prepared and engaged. But outside of that, I think it will be hard to monitor.
Okay, so one thing's for sure, we have until July 1st to put ballot measures. It's like a 120-day window. So yeah, about July 1st would be the deadline to put any of these ballot measures forward. So since we seem a little unsure of ourselves, I'm going to suggest we continue this to another meeting. But before I do that, any other thoughts from the council members on my left? Okay, not the political left. Let's not go there. And I'm center. Beautiful.
I'm willing to speak up on this. I understand some of the reasons to increase the compensation. And I have, for some years now, suggested that maybe the compensation ought to be increased to give more people in the community the financial opportunity to serve on city council. But I think we did that to some extent in raising or voting the first reading of the ordinance from $220 to $300 tonight. I would be reluctant to, as a private citizen, which I will be, vote in favor of an increase to something like $900 or more, because I agree with Councilmember Collins, it is public service. It shouldn't empty our bank accounts or be a hardship, but it shouldn't be such that people decide, by golly, I'm going to make $900 a month being on city council. We have over the decades had very active council members, and we have had some very inactive council members. And there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's no way of controlling who's active, who's not active, forcing somebody not to be a backbencher once they get on city council. And if they get on for the wrong reasons, we as a community are stuck with them for 4 years. So number one, I don't think I would be supportive of sending to the public a further increase, unless we're talking about something like raising it to $500 or less. On the other hand, talking about term limits, I have not seen a whole lot of people over the last more than 2 decades stepping up to serve on city council. Sometimes I've had to beat the bushes and talk to I don't know how many people saying, please, please, please. Please put in your application to run for city council. I think the city could be putting itself, I think there could be unintended consequences of putting term limits on.
Yeah, I can't say disagree with that.
Yeah. So
You want to hold
while
off
this
on
matter
that
may
for now?
get continued to a further time, I would not be supportive of either one of the items on agenda item
To the chair.
11.
Gotcha. Can Jeff go first?
Oh, so yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to say that the County Board of Supervisors make about $35,000 to $40,000 a year to serve, and I think we would all be in agreement that they're doing it because they care for their community. And, you know, it's a hard position to do, and they probably put in as much work as we do, or we put in as much work as they do.
You sure about that?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, I see what you're saying. You're being facetious. So I don't think that earning money to, you know, we have to be very on top of things. We have to put in a lot of time. There's a demographic that isn't well represented here because of kids and families and business, and it's hard to get away from all that and serve. I'm able to do that, but again, I'm one. The volunteer pool is very shallow, so if we can entice business families or community members that could use an incentive to serve, that have an opinion that is vital to our continuing on as a thriving community, then I think that that is our duty to have the voters look at that.
Jeff? Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you.
Well, my position on the salary increases is already known. I don't support it. But term limits is another question. This is my 10th year, and I always kind of go back to the basics. What problem are we trying to solve? I've heard from multiple council members who accurately portray that the pool of volunteers to come, or what effectively is volunteers to come do this public service job, is narrow or shallow. And the answer is, yeah, who wants to go be up on a panel where basically everybody complains and says rather ugly things to you in the emails I get anyway, and I don't think it's just me. Yeah, it's not an easy job from that perspective. On the other hand, I don't think we're doing that badly. I think the talent that has showed up here and is here is doing a pretty good job. As I said, I've been on council for 10 years, and while Tim is right, he's had to, I know his efforts on securing council members to come join and do this public service work. The answer is they have. People have showed up and done a good job. And on the other hand, term limits, we only meet twice a month. Twice a month.
Guys, I meant to interject earlier, and apparently I was muted. I wanted to just clarify this item. I don't know what happened. This was specifically supposed to be about term limits only. I thought in the previous item we addressed, the salary issue. This is, solely to discuss the term limits. And I think it's true from what Councilman Stern says. A, do we want term limits? B, what are the pros and cons? And if we want that, do we want to put an ordinance that says, what number of terms, whether consecutive or not, would we want to limit, and do we want to pass an ordinance on that? So my apologies, I don't know how the two got conflated.
I think it's fine, Todd. I think we decided that at the last meeting.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to let Todd, we're going to let Jeff finish his thoughts here.
The city manager was talking about pros and cons. Because we only meet twice a month, and that's literal. We literally cannot, by law, Brown Act, get together in any other place at any other time. Can't do it. To learn how to do this job, there's some independent work you can do, but if you're trying to work together and develop what happens on this council, budgets, all the categories of infrastructure with police, fire, public works, planning, finance, administration, all the aspects that you have to learn, a lot of which you pick up in the meetings, or at least some of which you pick up in the meetings. We meet twice a month. Do I think we should have some kind of term limit? Yeah. But it took years for me to really, I'm just speaking personally, for me to figure out, hey, look, am I doing as good a job today at year 10 or better job today than I was 6 years ago? Absolutely. And that's because there's a wide breadth of areas that you have to have or develop expertise on to be able to participate in a meaningful manner. I don't think this is a 2-term limit kind of scenario. Maybe it's a 3 or 4-term limit type of scenario. But there's a lot of value in having experience up here, and we haven't ever had the situation that I'm aware of where we can't find anybody and we're down a person because nobody showed up to want to go take the job. And now I'm done.
All right, I'm going to close this out. We don't have any sort of consensus here. And these are my thoughts very quickly. If we're going to do well, first of all, we cannot, as a council, increase our pay more than 5% a year. That's been established, right? But the council can't do that itself. We're limited to 5% a year, so now we can only.
Increase to $950 a month. Anything above that must go to the voters.
Okay. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable even going there. The 300 is fine. I think that getting back to what's been brought up a couple times tonight, the protocols for the city council would have to be changed. And I do think that any substantial pay increase, even if to $500, should go before the voters. Prior to that, there can be changes in the protocol showing the council protocol wherein the actual workload increases. If there's going to be any chance of this passing, okay, these are my thoughts. I actually don't think it'll pass unless there's some compensatory increase in workload. I think people will just, 300 is good enough. That's to be the attitude. And frankly, that might be my attitude too if I was voting, if I wasn't part of council. So those are my thoughts on increasing the duties of council and putting before the voters an increase in pay, a substantial increase in pay, whether it's $500, $700, $900 a month. Term limits, I think, are problematic due to the lack of volunteerism with respect to just volunteering to run. I'm of the opinion that there's a lack of interest in being involved with politics at this level in the city, based on the number of people that actually run for office since I've been here in 2006. So it's problematic, but I'd have to say that there is an issue with not high, but higher compensation and the possibility of entrenched incumbency. So I think that putting before the voters, should we decide to go to that higher pay, would be appropriate. And I think a 4-term limit, not necessarily consecutive, would be something to ask them to vote on. Anyhow, those are my thoughts. We don't really have strong consensus on this. It's sort of, this has been a discussion where we're kind of brainstorming the items, and I think that we'll just continue this indefinitely, and it'll come back to a city council meeting if we get some clarification as to what we want to do. So with that said, we'll go to number 12, but with a quick 3-minute break, I've got to go use the restroom. So. 7:49. All right. Let's restart. And we are down to our last debatable agenda item, number 12, discussion and possible action regarding temporary acquisition of 3 properties for the purpose of performing an environmental assessment. Is the city manager still with us?
I am.
Okay, Todd, you've got the floor.
Okay, so the ad hoc committee studying one-way streets on Chestnut and Mount Shasta, as well as the daylighting of Castle Creek, have been meeting, and we've come up with a preliminary plan for both. We're looking at the daylighting of Castle Creek first, and so, we'd be obviously opening up Castle Creek through downtown, through East Castle Street. And one of the issues in creating such park is that you don't want a competing eyesore. So we have a property that the Beers have owned. There were a lot of junked in in dilapidated vehicles, and that would be viewed from this park. And so the idea is that if we were to move forward with daylighting of Castle Creek, and we have an opportunity to potentially acquire these properties, first we'd want to do environmental work to see if the two parking lots are contaminated, as well as the structure itself. Now, a little bit about the plan, which Tom Hesselden's our landscape architect, it's part of the committee, will be presenting at the next meeting, is the proposal. The proposal for the one-ways is to create angled parking on North Mount Shasta Boulevard. Contrary to what's in the staff report, there will be no parking spaces lost. There will be angled parking, as well as a separated bike lane added on Chestnut. Angled parking would move to parallel parking, and a protected bike lane would be added, and a handful of spaces would be lost on Chestnut. Now, the issue is it worth the city's time to tie these properties up for 6 months, study whether there are environmental impacts, and then make a decision if we were to move forward and purchase these properties on what that use would be, whether it would be purchased for additional parking or some other use. I know Councilman Collins has some ideas for that property, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, qualifying questions.
City Manager, do we know, or do we have any idea what the purchase price of these 3 plots are? Because I assume the reason we would lease them for 6 months to determine any environmental, determine exactly what we're getting ourselves into, especially environmentally. It would be towards purchasing them. Do we know what the purchase price is?
No, but the discussions with the owners up front have been that any purchase price that would be amenable to the city would have to be at the value of those properties, because if we were to purchase these properties, we would have to do that via grants. And the only way you qualify for a grant to purchase these properties is if it is consistent with the value of those properties. So part of this, we'd have to, if the environmental is clear, part of this process would involve an assessment of what these properties are actually worth once you find out if there are environmental issues. And if there are environmental issues, that you just walk away from it because it's too cost prohibitive.
Right. And are there other ways to purchase this property other than via grant?
I can't see. I mean, we could look at people that wanted to contribute to this project, but the only way, we can seek people from the community that are interested in purchasing it, but I don't think it would be a wise move for the city necessarily, depending on to purchase them outright. I think we'd want to chase grants for that purchase.
Okay. The rest of my commentary isn't questions, so I'll hold that to discussion.
All right, the staff report indicates that the staff recommends the option of basically optioning the property for 6 months at the rate of $2,200 per month while the city performs environmental due diligence. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is having an option to purchase and paying the $2,200 per month lease for 6 months or up to 6 months while the city has the opportunity to look at the properties, determine the degree to which they may be degraded, and what the fair value is. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then on top of that, we then evaluate what the value of those properties are, and then if it is consistent with what the value is, the city may want to purchase it for the purposes of being reimbursed through a grant. But it would have to be, it'd only be reimbursable if those properties are at fair market value.
Right. And the market value would also be determined based upon what degradation, if any, the properties have incurred in terms of environmental hotspots, diesel contamination, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's correct. And given that, this is a lot with abandoned vehicles on it, I'm sure we're going to find contamination. It's just to what extent. Is it something that we can, easily mitigate? Or is it something that's just it's a lost cause and it's too much money to sink?
Something that can be dealt with, right. And that requires some time to assess. We're going to get some snow this week. We'll probably have to wait until springtime to do full assessment. Is that realistic? Spring or summer?
Ultimately, I think we can start environmental now. All they're looking to do is, in the first phase, is to be drilling cores and looking at what they come up with.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Frankly, I'm supportive of this proposal.
All right, I know all about this, so I don't have any questions. Let's go to public comment. And Tom is going to be our featured speaker on this. Come on up, Tom. It's Tom Hesseldins.
Yeah, I just wanted to add some information to this. What's driving this is that in doing anything that would cause a reduction in parking, we need to mitigate, and that's a big deal. And this is the best property by far to do that. I had looked at the Banner Bank site a number of years ago when we were first talking about a Castle Street Park. Jerry Hickey owned it at the time. He was willing to sell it, but at that time we couldn't find the money. So there's an example of losing an opportunity because it got built out. The timing coincidentally worked out really well on this because Steve Beers bought the Raymac property and relocated right at the perfect time, but the owner, Brownell, wants to get a new lessee in the building and holding the property, and the $2,200 a month is what Beers had been paying for it. So this holds the property. We can go in and do the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments to assess the degree of contamination. We can have an appraisal done because grant makers won't pay more than appraised value. And I just wanted to quantify the parking issue. Anything done with Castle Street would be a minimum of 25 parking spaces lost. It could be as many as 48. With the couplet idea, just going one way in and of itself wouldn't reduce parking, but if a class 4 bikeway that's separated from the roadway, so you'd have parked cars and then a bikeway and then a sidewalk, we could lose 36 parking spaces for the whole range of the couplet. So, and this is, a little bit of the cart before the horse because we're going to go through a full public review. We're going to have to satisfy CEQA. We're hoping to get a grant that would pay for all of that, plus the land acquisition, plus the build out. But securing the land is so critical to be able to do anything. That's really what's driving this. And according to Todd, the owner needs an answer before the next council meeting. So there's some urgency to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom, if the city were to acquire this property, well, first lease and then perhaps purchase, How many parking spots approximately do you think?
40,
Oh, okay.
yes. 30 if you don't tear down the building, 10 more if you do tear down the building. And there was some concern about contaminants under the building, which might warrant tearing it down. So we're not sure. You would at least get 30 out of this. So quite substantial in terms of moving along these other ideas that the city would like to do. And there's always a way out. You know, in the worst case, if you decide not to eliminate parking through daylighting a creek or doing something with bikeways, you can sell the property. So the key here is to hold it in the interim through a lease option, and then as we seek grant money to purchase it fee title.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
All right, we have 4 other members still in the audience. Would you like to comment on this? I'm seeing no. You bored back there? Come on, this has been a very interesting meeting, Dave. Okay. Nobody online? All right. So public comments is closed on this. So let's go to council discussion. Tim.
I think it's a no-brainer. I think really the city has to do that.
So I'll say a few things to make it even bigger no-brainer. Tessa?
Mayor and I have been involved with this since the inception, and I agree it's a no-brainer. I just wanted to commend Tom for all of his work. He comes with, there's no approximates. It is exactly 30 spaces. There's never a guessing game, so I appreciate all of his work. Thank you.
All right, so as briefly as possible, the ad hoc committee that Tessa and I are part of are looking at 3 different but related items. One, the one-way streets, or the couplet, as we've discussed here, Castle Creek daylighting, and implementation of the active transportation study bike lanes in that area. As Tom said, in all cases, if we don't do the bike lane, the one-way couplet wouldn't necessarily eliminate parking spaces. That's true. I think that's what you said, right? But the project that we're much more excited about is the Castle Creek daylighting, and that will definitely eliminate. It's a greenway with that will definitely eliminate parking spaces. So to help all of these potential individual and related projects, finding more parking is critical. The crux has always been whether we could make some sort of arrangements with Steve Beers and the owner of the property to use part of the parking lot. Then Steve Beers bought the Raoul Raymack building, and it's a much better facility for what he does. So I think he's happy with the location, but he is under a lease, and he would like to get out of that as quickly as possible. He is paying $22.50. He is working with his landlord to find other tenants. And if we don't take this opportunity, you may end up with a fleet of taco trucks sitting in the grass there. No, I'm not joking. Okay, so taco trucks. It's not a joke. So you had a field of somewhat disabled-looking vehicles, and you'll now, not that taco trucks were a problem, but that's what you're going to have there. So it behooves us to do everything possible and as quickly as possible to option this property, yeah. It's actually 3 parcels. Yep. That's my commentary. That's my narrative on this.
Well, I think Councilmember Stearns covered it. This seems like a no-brainer because we put ourselves in control of short and/or long-term, regardless of what 4 grants take, whether we get grants or not. We put ourselves potentially in charge of this property right in the middle of Mount Shasta, which I think I'd rather have it in our hands than others. That said, this isn't the time for the discussion other than on a headline basis. But the proposal is to get that property, because if we're going to lease it for 6 months to determine its environmental viability and then pay a fair market rate, the question becomes, how are you going to pay for this? And step one is, well, with a grant. I'm been on council long enough that I've seen the go down the, oh, we'll pay for it with a grant path, and that doesn't materialize. I'm not saying this one won't. I have no idea. I'm not on the subcommittee. I don't know if that'll work or not. But I have some suggestions, which I'm not going to make here at this time because it's not the right time to do this, on how the city can pay for it ourselves without raising taxes, to bring in additional revenue streams that will pay off purchasing this 3 lots or plots over time. And other than that, like I said, I'm for leasing this. That's absolutely.
I mean, worst case, we end up renting it longer than we thought, but yeah.
I make a motion
Go ahead.
that we authorize staff to engage with other parties for the purpose of leasing these 3 lots that are set forth on page 202 of the agenda at the rate of $2,200 per month, or
Correction,
thereabouts.
$2,250.
Or $2,250 per month. And with the further possibility of obtaining a option to purchase on these properties, and that we encourage the staff to act forthwith.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. The direction passes 4-0. All right. So Tessa has a outside meeting to report on.
You are looking at the newest Regional 1 member of the Sacramento division for Cal Cities. So, well, I was being sarcastic about the accolade. So we meet once a month, and today was my first meeting, and it seems like a nice coming together of the minds of Northern California to make sure we're doing best practices. They're doing a few meetings. One is on police retention and hiring and making sure that we're doing everything we're doing there. So I'll bring info when I have it.
Thank you, Tessa. Let's move on to future agenda items. I'm not going to go through the list. It is very long, and we have run long enough tonight. Does anybody have a definite item they would like to put on the future agenda item list?
Nothing to add to the future agenda items, of which we have many.
Yes.
I'm wondering, are we to receive anything in writing prior to Wednesday's special city council goal-setting workshop, e.g. notes from our prior meeting?
Yeah, I think I did promise that.
Okay, so, yeah. Can
I forgot,
real
yeah.
quick? All right, so I've been going over what it is that we talked about in the past. So my approach, I'll lead the meeting with Todd's help, essentially go through categories and talk about where we are in them. For instance, water, the water enterprise zone, the water utility. It's very, very easy to review that. I've been on the ad hoc committee regarding that. So I'm going to break down things and get housing. We have the hospital, we have the Nest, we have Danco. Get updates from Todd on those items.
I think most, if not all, the things we wanted, as the possible exception of the restaurant on the roof. But now it's starting, so maybe we can, yeah. Anyhow, the most of what we set out as objectives is either pending or actually coming to a close. So it'll be a category by category review of all the things that are happening. And then we need to add to that if you have strong visions or objectives you'd like to see happening. So there'll be a review, and then additional items.
And Tessa, could you?
Well, yeah, I was
Email us?
thinking of the easiest way. Todd, do you still are you still here?
Yes.
Do you still have that picture of our last workshop hanging in your office?
I do. Kathy has it, and I'm going to bring a list of everything we've knocked off and everything that I think we should add on top of it. And John's taken a quick run at it and sent it to me via email today.
Okay, would you mind distributing that before our meeting to the council? Thank you.
Yeah.
So review, and it's a regular council meeting, right, Kathy? So we'll have to be public comment, or at least a chance for public comment. It's not going to be on Zoom, but anybody who's there will have the chance. So
Just to note, we are expecting a storm on Wednesday, so we'll just monitor that situation.
right, and so
Upstairs?
how are your Wednesdays 2 weeks from now, folks? I know somebody had a problem with the 17th.
Oh, 17th?
Is a problem,
That's
right?
1 week from today.
I have
Wednesday.
depositions on the 17th.
Right, so the 24th,
I think the 24th would be fine. Let's take a look.
and you're not starting your project yet, right?
No.
I'll be here.
Okay. So if we get snowed out, it's just too much of a hassle to have the meeting. We'll continue it to the 24th.
24th looks fine.
All right,
Or we may not
so,
complete the meeting, and, because we have, it starts at 3 o'clock. We've got not LAFCO, but we've
well,
got
yeah, so I was going to be a little forceful and try and get the meeting done by 4:30, 4:45, so we could get
Perfect.
to the meeting.
Okay.
You're not going to the little meeting, okay. All right, no new agenda items?
Nope.
All right. That being the case, I'm going to close this meeting at 8:13. A lot shorter than I thought it would be.